Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are for this um, international session, a Learn Studio session for Publish a Web App to Azure with Visual Studio. We're going to show you how to use the publishing features of Visual Studio to deploy and manage an ASP.NET Core web app hosted on Azure App Service tonight. Now, in the meeting chat, Anna has posted this link right here, the aka.ms/learn/publish web app. That's the Microsoft Learn module we're going to be working through tonight. So our agenda tonight, this morning, again, it's international. It's actually 1 a.m. where I am in the middle of the US. I am Cam Soper. I'm your presenter this morning. I'm a senior content developer at Microsoft, where I work on the .NET docs. Most of what I've been doing over these past few months is working on Microsoft Learn modules like what we're going to be working through tonight. Now, I didn't work on the one we're working through tonight, but it's been something I've been working on quite a bit. If you'd like to follow me, my Twitter alias is right there. Assisting me tonight are going to be Adrian, Anna, and Renee. My friend Adrian is a senior program manager working on Microsoft Learn. Anna is also a program manager in Microsoft in marketing. And Renee is also a senior content developer working on Learn. Not pictured here is our producer, Jacob, who's running everything behind the scenes and is being super helpful and not getting any credit, which I think he should have plenty. This session will be recorded. If you have questions at any time, please go ahead and put them in the chat window. The moderators will answer them if they can, and if they can't, they'll forward them up to me. Adrian and Renee, please feel free to just break in over me and let me know what any questions that come up that you think might be germane and relevant and want me to demo a solution for.
Fantastic, will do.
Thanks. Here's our code of conduct for our event. I won't read it all, but the gist of it is that Microsoft wants everybody to feel welcome and comfortable, and we simply will not tolerate harassment or discrimination. I'm sure everybody's seen this code of conduct by now, and we will abide by it. So, without any further ado, I'd like for everyone to go ahead and in their web browsers, open up that URL, that aka.ms/learn/publish web app. This is the page that you should come to when that URL resolves. So this is a Microsoft Learn module. Now, Microsoft Learn modules are a new type of documentation / user education experience that we do at Microsoft. They're designed around conceptual information and exercises in such a way to give you some hands-on learning with actual tools, with actual Azure resources, for example. We have currently hundreds of modules available, and modules are organized into what we call learning paths. For example, one learning path that I would recommend that you check out after this module is our Azure Fundamentals learning path. It's a collection of multiple modules that walk you through pretty much everything you need to know to get the lay of the land around Azure. In an example of some of the things we can do in these interactive Learn modules, I'm going to actually just very quickly show you one of the ones that I've written. I didn't write this by myself. I wrote this with my co-author, Scott. We being .NET developers focus on Learn modules that, of course, instruct people in .NET. One of the great things about the Microsoft Learn environment is this concept of a sandbox. I'm just going to hop ahead a little bit here in the module. And I'm going to activate my sandbox. Again, this is not the module we're doing tonight. This is my module. I'm just showing you some of the things we can do and learn before we get started. So I told it to activate my sandbox. So what's going on behind the scenes right now is Learn is actually setting me up with a temporary Azure subscription. It's associated to the account that I have signed into Microsoft Docs with. As you can see, I've signed in up here in the upper right with my Microsoft account. So it's created this Azure subscription for me. And one of the really neat things we can do in Learn is we can pop open this terminal window, essentially, in the browser that presents the Azure Cloud Shell. The Azure Cloud Shell is a Linux environment where we can go in and we can do all kinds of Linuxy things, all kinds of developer type tasks. Like, for example, we could say .NET -- version, and we can see that the .NET SDK 2.2.402 is installed. This particular learning path that we've created actually has a dependency on .NET Core 3.1. So it turns out that we give you a script at the beginning that you can paste into the command window, and it goes out and grabs the latest version of .NET 3.1, brings it down. It usually goes a little quicker than this. Oh, here we go. So now if I type .NET -- version, see we're at 3.1.202, and we can begin the tasks in this module, which start off with, I'll just do this very briefly again to show what we can do and learn. I can create a new project, and then go into that location, pop open a handy editor where I can actually edit my C# files and compile right there in the cloud. I didn't have to install anything locally. So Learn is this great kind of, well, I'll use the term sandbox, where we can get in and play with Azure resources free of charge. We can play with developer tools. We as the authors of these modules can set up environments for you to start hacking on. We can have an application in a certain state and give you a task to build on. So the Microsoft Learn module we're starting with tonight doesn't have the interactive stuff in the cloud. It does use a sandbox, but it uses that sandbox in conjunction with Visual Studio. And I'm going to walk you through all that. Just to review the prerequisites, you should have some basic general knowledge of the Azure cloud environment, some basic familiarity with Visual Studio 2019, web app concepts, programming knowledge, HTML knowledge, and the most important thing, you need a local installation of Visual Studio 2019. And this module, actually, we just updated this module a couple of days ago to match the very latest version of Visual Studio 2019 that the update started going out on Tuesday. So if you don't have that update, the experience might look a little bit different. I'm going to go kind of slow so everybody can make sure that they got the update. The session's being recorded. If you don't have the update and you don't have time to install it, you can always come back to this recording later on and review. So again, here I am in Microsoft Learn on this module. I've logged in, so we get our XP and our progress. If you've never done this module before, you should have a start button somewhere on this intro screen. I have done this, so you don't, but I'll start at the introduction. So the scenario that we're going with in this module is that you're a developer working at a ski resort, and you're going to build an application to let users view maps and lift tickets and so forth. You're going to be using ASP.NET Core, and you're going to be using Visual Studio 2019 to build it. Finally, you're going to host it on Azure App Service. So what you're going to take away from this module is you're going to create the web app in ASP.NET Core using Visual Studio. You're going to publish it to Azure using Visual Studio, and then we're going to change it. We're going to make some changes to the app and publish it to Azure again. So the very first step, we're going to make sure we have the right workloads in Visual Studio. Now, if you haven't ever installed Visual Studio yourself, you might not have seen the Visual Studio installer. So I just hit my start button. I'm going to search for Visual Studio. Whoops, I can't type tonight. Visual Studio. There's installer, Visual Studio installer. I'll go to him. I got a UAC prompt. You probably didn't see that. Now, I only have one instance of Visual Studio installed right now. One of the really neat things about modern Visual Studio 2019, is you can mix and match different SKUs and like the preview version and the current version. I'm currently running the preview version, so I'm like a release ahead of the general release version. However, you can see I'm actually running 16.6, which is the current general release version. So it should be the same experience, even though my splash screen when I start Visual Studio will say Visual Studio Preview. If I go in to modify my installation, Visual Studio Installer lists the different workloads that are available to install with Visual Studio. Now, workloads are sets of tools and other plugins for Visual Studio that are related to a specific task. And the two tasks that we're doing tonight are ASP.NET and web development and Azure development. So the ASP.NET and web development includes tools, includes like the it includes the .NET Core SDK, so tools for editing Razor pages and ASP.NET Core, other JavaScript tools, container tools. The Azure development workload contains tools such as Azure Server Manager and other Azure SDK type tools that make it easy to interact with resources in Azure. And I have both of these installed, so I don't have to change anything in my installation. So the button down here in my lower right says close. If you didn't have either of these workloads and you checked the box, this button would say modify, and you would click that button, and at this point it would modify your Visual Studio installation to include those two workloads. So at this point, some of you might be installing those workloads. Again, remember this is being recorded, so feel free to come back at any time if you want to just watch and learn for now and then come back and review later on. I think that's a great strategy. I'm going to go ahead and launch Visual Studio, however, from right here in my Visual Studio installer. And here we go. Let me hop back over. So this is all everything we talked about, what are workloads and installing workloads. Let's go ahead and go to the next step on the Learn module. So we're going to create a new ASP.NET Core App. So I've already done that first step. I've already opened Visual Studio 2019 on my machine. In fact, why don't I put this over here? And we'll put, we'll just layer Visual Studio over that a little bit. And from the Visual Studio landing page, says under Get Started, we're going to create a new project. Now, depending on what workloads you've got installed, there could be all kinds of different project templates listed here. You see, I've got dozens. The quickest way to get to the template that you want, if it's not right there, which in this case it is, but the quickest way is generally to search for it. If you search for web, there we go. There's our ASP.NET Core web application. So I'm going to select that and click Next. So what are we going to name our project? Well, if we look on the document, it says that we're going to name it Alpine Ski House. And then the location is fine, and the solution name is also fine. So I'll come down here to the lower right. I'm going to click my Create button. Oh. Sure enough, I can't because I've already run through this recently. I'm actually going to change my location. There you go. So we are now creating a new ASP.NET Core web application. So what kind of ASP.NET Core web application are we going to create? Well, we're going to create something that we can deploy to Azure App Service. We could create an API. So that's like a RESTful web API thing. We would interact with that with like Postman or curl or something like that. We could create a MVC web application using ASP.NET Core MVC, which is a framework. MVC stands for Model View Controller. I'm actually just going to use regular old web application, which we also sometimes refer to as a Razor Pages project. It's little known fact, Razor Pages and Razor Pages projects are basically identical to MVC projects. The Razor Pages are built on top of MVC behind the scenes. It's all the same stack. But we'll just go ahead and go with Razor Pages. So what are Razor Pages? Razor Pages, if you're familiar with any type of web templating engine like PHP or I thought I had my my notifications silenced. I apologize for that. Let me do that very quickly. There we go. So Razor Pages, if you've used any kind of templating engine like PHP or classic ASP, Razor Pages should be pretty familiar to you right off the bat. The idea behind Razor Pages is that they're essentially a template where we can combine static HTML with code, and we can inject things in the code as we go. Now, we're not going to do a whole lot of changes to any of these Razor Pages or anything like that. You know, I think I might actually change this text right here, though. I'll just say, hello from Microsoft Learn. There we go. All right, so we've got our new Razor project. Let's catch up here on the Learn module. We've created our new application. I made a change. You don't have to make the same change. I just made it just so we could demonstrate what it looks like when we run the application. And with that, we can hit. The instructions say press F5 to build the project and run in debug mode, or Control and F5 to build the project and run without attaching the debugger. And then it explains that running without the debugger allows you to make changes on the fly if you want. I usually run with the debugger on because I like to set breakpoints and get a view into my locals and watches and so forth. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit F5. And my ASP.NET Core application is going to build, and then it's going to run within IIS, IIS Express, so Internet Information Server, a scaled down version that comes with Visual Studio. Now, you could also run it in what we call Kestrel. That's the .NET Core's built-in web server, but we're going to use IIS tonight. And as you can see, our application runs. This is running right here on my machine. As a web application in IIS Express. It's a .NET Core application, and it's listening on port 44372. Running. So it's an application. It works. We've proven that we have a web application. So what's next? Well, next we'll talk about the Azure App Service. So what is Azure App Service? Azure App Service, one of the ways that I describe it is simply IIS in the cloud. It's an IIS as a service. It's the ability to take your web application and put it up in the cloud, and you might define some service parameters, like whether you want a shared hosting model or a dedicated hosting model, or if you're using a dedicated hosting model, how big of a machine you want or how many instances you want of those virtual machines. But aside from defining broad service parameters like that, you don't have to do any care and feeding. Right? You don't have to run the server farm. Azure is the server farm. Azure runs the server farm. You're just doing some settings on the app service that might have some impact on how it renders and displays your application to users. Azure App Service is not in any way limited to .NET. It runs all kinds of web applications built in .NET Core and Framework, Ruby, Java, PHP, Python, Node. I don't think I've heard of many stacks that you can't get running out there, because you can even do some containerized things. It's very flexible is what I'm getting at. Now, the thing that you need to understand about app service and app service plans is an app service plan is a grouping of your app services that defines what type of service level they have. Like, for example, you might have 3 different web apps running in your account, and you've got 3 separate app service resources. Those 3 separate app service resources might, for example, you might want them to share a single virtual machine in a dedicated hosting model. You would define that with your hosting plan. Your hosting plan would say, I am going to have a single virtual machine with certain specs, say, 2-core with 4 gigs of RAM, and that's my hosting plan. And I have these 3 Azure App Service resources that are going to be using that same hosting plan. That way, you get to share resources across those app service resources. So each service plan, the things that you have to define in a service plan are the region, so where it's located. So we have, I think the number is 61, 62 Azure regions now. It's a lot of regions. So you're choosing that region. You're choosing the number of VM instances, or if it's a shared hosting model, you're specifying that, where you're sharing resources with other app service resources. The size of the VM instances, if they're dedicated VMs, and which pricing tier you're using. So there's not just a free tier, which is part of the shared hosting model, and then there's the shared tier, which is definitely the shared hosting model. There's basic, standard, premium, premium V2, and isolated. So those are all different pricing tiers that have different levels of priority and different levels of VM sizes and so forth. So there's a discussion here on the module that talks a little bit about the differences between those dedicated compute modes, basic, standard, premium, and premium V2. The short version is the standard service plan is best for most production workloads. The premium service plan is for high capacity workloads where you don't want the cost of a dedicated plan. And lastly, what we call isolated plan. And lastly, the isolated plan is on dedicated VMs that are specifically dedicated to your app service resources, and even have a dedicated Azure Virtual Network. And then the last piece of information that you're going to need when you create that Azure App Service hosting plan is you're going to need to specify the resource group that it lives in. Azure has what they call the Azure Resource Model. Azure Resource Manager model for managing resources in Azure. And one of the great things about using resource groups is it makes it easy to manage different resources as parts of a overarching application. Like, for example, if you have multiple app services that work together with maybe a front end and a back end API, you could have those in the same resource group, and they would be billed as part of the same resource group, and you could even delete them or move them to other subscriptions as a group. So having talked a little bit now about Azure App Service and how Azure App Service works with hosting plans and what we need to know to create our hosting plan, we're actually going to publish our app to Azure now. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're on Unit 5 of the module. We're going to activate our sandbox. Now, you saw with my other module that I was doing earlier, I clicked Activate Sandbox, and it opened up that neat little terminal window. We're not getting a terminal window in this one. We're going to activate the sandbox, and it's going to create our sandbox in the cloud. And remember, our sandbox it's that temporary Azure subscription that gives us permission to use resources in Azure without billing us. It takes just a few seconds. There we go. So the sandbox is created. So now that the sandbox is created, I'm going to go back over to Visual Studio. That's my Visual Studio installer. There's Visual Studio. I'm going to right click on my project. I'm going to go down to, where is it? There it is, Publish, right there. Right click, Publish. So this is the part that's going to be a little bit different if you're using an older version of Visual Studio. It's going to be very similar, so if you follow along, you should probably be able to figure it out. But if you're not using the newest release of Visual Studio 2019, 16.6 or newer, this experience is going to look just a tiny bit different. Again, this is recorded. Don't worry about it. You can always come back and check it out. So the very first thing we need to choose is where are we publishing? They give us a bunch of choices. Are we publishing to a folder? Are we publishing to an IIS server? We're publishing to Azure. So we'll select Azure and click Next. And then which Azure service do we want to use to host our application? So we have three variants of Azure App Service. We have, I'm going to start from the bottom, we have App Service Container, which is where we're going to build a Docker image and put that in Azure Container Registry and run it on Azure App Service. We have Azure App Service for Linux, which actually it's a valid choice for .NET Core. .NET Core is cross-platform, so it runs equally well on Windows and Linux. Now, the reason we're not using Linux tonight is Linux doesn't, this morning, wherever you are, the reason we're not using Linux is because the Azure App Service for Linux doesn't offer a free or a shared hosting model. The Azure App Service for Linux only offers the various dedicated hosting models, and we're for purposes of Microsoft Learn sandboxes, we're trying to keep the expenses down. So we're going to use Windows. We're going to use Azure App Service for Windows because that has a shared model that we can use. So we'll select Azure App Service for Windows and click Next. And then it says, okay, here are the app services in your subscription you can deploy to. Well, the very first thing I need to point out is it wants me to re-enter my credentials. It wants me to make sure I'm logged in. Yeah, it says I need to be signed in. So, okay, I'll do that. I'm going to click re-enter. If you're not signed in, it'll probably be prompting you right now to sign in. So go ahead and pop up your sign-in dialog and do whatever steps it's going to take. Here in Microsoft, we actually have a certificate-based model, so I don't actually have to type anything in. I can just click OK because the computer I'm on is already authenticated. I'm just waiting for it to act like it completed. Wants me to verify it. You know what? That can't be right. That cannot be. Here, we'll do this instead. Because that was a Microsoft account login, like a Outlook.com account login. That should not have been what we signed in with. Well, I'm not sure what's going on with my authentication. I'm going to go ahead very briefly. You all just stay right where you are in the steps. I'm actually going to close Visual Studio and cancel out of this. It's stuck in some kind of a state.
And so why are you doing this? So why are you signing in if we're using the free sandbox?
So the sandbox creates this temporary subscription, but it associates it to the same account that you've got signed in to Microsoft Learn. So the you actually have to be signed into Visual Studio with that same account. Now, it could be a Microsoft account. When I say Microsoft account, I mean what we used to call a Windows Live account, right? Or in the case of a lot of folks, it's going to be their work account. Now, my work account is a Microsoft.com account, and for some reason, it keeps redirecting me to sign in, and it's trying to sign it in as an Outlook account. This send notification thing, that is definitely an Outlook account thing. I'm going to close Visual Studio and reopen it. We'll be picking up right from the spot Don't do anything with your Visual Studio. This is just me. Let me try this to troubleshoot. Make sure it's dead before I go back in. Yep, it's dead.
That was impressively fast. I love performance on VS 2019 versus some of the older releases.
They have come a long ways in VS performance, and on top of that, I've got a pretty beefy machine going here, so so that helps for sure. Please just authenticate this time, because otherwise I'm going to have to go back out and create a new sandbox signed in with my Outlook account. I don't want to do that. The other thing I can do is I can sign out to everything in Visual Studio and just try it with that one account.
And fun, so one of our learners here today is actually on a Mac, and so of course the steps are a little bit different because this module was written specifically for Visual Studio 2019 for Windows. But as the learner discovered, the steps are actually similar enough, and you can do this on a Mac as well.
I'm not sure how I've gotten in this state. I've got one other thing I'm going to try before I go nuclear. And that is completely sign out of everything in Visual Studio. Fingers crossed. This is a different response.
Well, and unlike you, I'm actually running an older version of Visual Studio, so worst case, I can switch over. I'm not as brave as you running the preview versions.
Well, what's funny is the preview version that I'm on right now is the current general release version, so it should be the same. Azure AD, are you still there, Azure AD? Or did I lose you? Wait, here we go. Look, it's doing something. It's doing something. It's adding the account.
It's not too surprising that some of these Microsoft services are busy in the middle of build.
Yeah, I noticed that yesterday when we were moderating another one of these. All of a sudden, everything just got really slow, and that's really great. It means our build attendees are well. You know what? I'm just not even going to go down that path. We are gonna nope. It's should have enough. We'll see if it has enough to publish. I think it does. It has the credentials anyway. So publish, start. Here we go. Start to Azure App Service for Windows. It wants me to re-enter my credentials, but you know it actually has my subscriptions listed. So now the first step we need to do is we need to pick a subscription. Now I have dozens of subscriptions listed with my account. You're probably not going to have that many. The most likely scenario is you're going to have one or two, maybe three, maybe four, but you're not going to have dozens probably. The one that you want to switch to is going to say concierge subscription. Okay, so let me highlight that again real quick. Concierge subscription. That is the Microsoft Learn temporary subscription that was added to your account that you're signed in with. Now I've selected that subscription, and as you can see, I still don't have any app service resources listed under that subscription. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to click this button right here. This is create a new Azure app service. So it wants to know a few things. First of all, it wants to know the name of the app service. The name of the app service is Alpine Ski House, the name of the project. Plus, it added some random characters on there. They're not random. It's a date stamp. This needs to be unique across all of Azure. This is whatever the name of your project is, your app services. That is that's going to be part of its URI. So the URI for our site is actually going to be Alpine Ski House and then whatever .azurewebsites.net. Again, you're going to want to make sure you have your concierge subscription selected. Now, what resource group are we going to put the Alpine Ski House web app in? We're going to put it in the only resource group we have available to us. You'll see under resource group, if you're using the sandbox, the concierge subscription, you'll see a single resource group called learn dash, and then it'll be a 36 character GUID like that. Why did it just sign me out? This is no bueno. We'll try this one more time. Now, I don't know why the refresh token is just hosed, but it is hosed. There it just like read whatever itself. Okay, well, we'll just go quicker. And then the last thing that you're going to want to select is your hosting plan. Your hosting plan, it will have created a new one for you by default there, but you can see that it's creating it for me in the South Central US region, and it's defaulted to the S1, what we call the S1 SKU, so standard 1 SKU. We're not using the standard SKUs, those are the dedicated ones. We want to use the shared SKU. So I'm going to click new hosting plan. I'm going to leave the name alone. I'm going to leave the location alone, but I'm going to set the size to shared. And then I'll click OK. And then, gosh darn it. That'll all be filled out when I go back in here again. Luckily, this is the last thing we ever have to connect to Azure for to get information. From here on, it's just publishing, and it's a simpler thing behind the scenes. I'm going to go really quick this time so it doesn't do whatever it's doing. Stop asking me. I'm not signing in that way. It's really insistent, though.
And I hope everyone here as well actually appreciates the opportunity to watch Cam troubleshoot and debug like this. So as much as it's frustrating for him, it's a pleasure to watch a professional work through these problems.
A professional, that's high praise. Don't put pressure on me like that, man. Well, it errored out when I went to create the resource. So we have a couple of choices here. I can proceed to brute force it in a way that is completely different than what's in the learn module, and go like a different way, and like deploy through Git commands or something like that, or FTP even. Or we could use, I think, Adrian, that was you speaking, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, or we could use your instance, Adrian. Are you in a position to?
Let's see if I can get mine going. But if you want to show it from the command line, the great thing is all of the instructions are on learn. So everyone here can go and try the instructions as they're written. And if you want to show off a few fancy techniques, that works as well. And I will get mine set up at the same time in the background.
Yeah, so I think I will. So we're just gonna go off script, because at this point, really all we're doing is we step through that dialogue that for whatever reason I can't get logged in right now. I don't know why that is, and it publishes through Visual Studio, and that's the magic. It's not working for us, so we'll take an alternate path. I'm going to go down to publish. See what choices I have. Deploy your app to Azure IaaS, yada yada yada. Okay, let's do folder publishing. And it says, okay, do you want to put in a relative path? Whatever, it's giving us a path. We'll just take that path and finish. And publish. Okay, so that is what that created for us. If I go down to, if I right click on my project and go to open folder in File Explorer, in my bin folder, I think it was under debug. Was that a debug build or release build? I don't remember. It was release build. There we go. So there's our application. That's the Alpine Ski House.dll is all the code. The Alpine Ski House.views.dll are all the Razor pages. And then there's app settings, web.config, some other stuff. Now we're going to go out to the Azure portal, portal.azure.com. And if I look in my resource groups, go to my subscriptions. I'm going to actually unselect everything except for my concierge subscription. Did I pass it? I didn't think I passed it. So the demo gods are definitely not smiling on me tonight. The demo gods are wrathful and angry.
Hey Ken, Renee here.
Yes.
Just wondering. So I think you would have to switch top right to the concierge directory.
Thank you. Thank you. That is the step that I was missing. That doesn't look right. Current plus delegated directories. That's not even.
Yeah, it would be down where it says all directories. Isn't that the one?
Subscription.
No, further down.
Further down, further down. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I don't. You can tell I don't usually do the portal with the sandbox.
All right, that's the one.
Yep. Thank you, Renee.
Again, great, because that's the kind of thing that it doesn't usually happen when we do learn modules, but every once in a while you will be in the wrong directory. So that's a great tip if you're going through other learn content as well.
So we can actually browse to that resource group in that subscription, that Microsoft Learn Sandbox subscription, and we don't have our app service. There's nothing here got created. Visual Studio couldn't talk to it because it couldn't authenticate with my account. The easiest way to add our app service is we'll just go to create a resource and type app service, or actually I think web app. There we go, web app. We're going to create a web app resource. We're going to create it in the concierge subscription in the only resource group we have. We're going to name it Cam hopes this demo goes better. .azurewebsites.net. We're going to select a runtime stack. Interestingly enough, the .NET Core runtime stack for a long time didn't actually, I don't know if they've changed it, but for the longest time it was identical. What got set up was basically the identical on the back end, the same thing as what got set up for .NET Framework. It just choosing core framework here was irrelevant. I don't know if that's still the case, so I would choose .NET Core. Operating system, again, we're going to go with Windows because that's what has our shared hosting model available to us. And then we get into the app service plan. So we'll change our size. And under dev test, there's our free, our shared, and our basic. I'm going to choose shared. I'll click next. And the next thing I want to know is if we want to enable application insights. I'm going to show you application insights if we have time. I lost a lot of time to my authentication issue. Application insights is a application performance monitoring suite in the cloud that is really gives you a lot of really great insights into the performance of your application from the time the request comes in to the time the response goes back and everywhere in between. We're not going to need any tags for this one, and so the last step is review and create. So it gives us the chance to review our settings one more time. This is all fine, and I'm going to go ahead and click create. So Azure Web Apps are they're actually one of the quicker resources to deploy. As you can see, we're already seeing lots of activity happen here on the deployment details. Usually it takes less than a minute. Hey, look, it was already done. That was significantly faster than a minute. So we can just hop right straight to that resource by clicking the Go to Resource button. So this is the resource management page for our app service. This is where all of our settings are. Like for example, if we wanted to go down to the configuration settings, some of these things might look familiar, right? So you might have seen App Insights instrumentation keys in your app.config settings and other web apps. Like I said, it's basically IIS in the cloud. They add a few other features, like for example, we can go to authentication authorization, and I can flip this button on, and I can tie it to Azure Active Directory or Microsoft account logins, Facebook, Google, just automatically at the Azure level. I don't even have to make any code changes. This just happens at the app service level for us. I'm going to discard these changes, but I just want you to know they were there. Now, as far as publishing our application, there's several different ways to do it. I'm going to look. I haven't actually looked through the portal in a while. I'm going to try and see what jumps out at me. Aha, Deployment Center. What jumps out at me is an easy way to deploy. So manual deployment. Deploy from here. We'll just use FTP. So there's my FTP site. Do I have an FTP client? I do have an FTP client. So the FTP client I'm using tonight is an open source tool called FileZilla. Yes, yes, yes. Updates, go away. I don't care. So they give us the FTPS endpoint. So we'll just grab that right there and paste that in. The username, I'll paste that in. And the password, which I will also paste in. Yeah, go ahead and save passwords. Could not connect to server. Was it a different port? Wait, application credentials, specific these credentials are used by FTP. Oh, it's FTPS, not SFTP. Okay, that's a different thing. That, I think we're just going to be able to do. Oh, wait. No, that's not a URL. That's not a host I pasted in there. Sorry. Oh, gosh. It's that night, man. Back over here to my portal. Where did my portal go? Host. Paste. Nope, still not copying that. Copy. Paste. There we go. Now can you connect? There we go. Password required. I thought I had a password. I'm going to change that password right after this, so no one try to get it on my my account. Excuse me. I'm going to take this off screen and make sure it's pasting the actual password. It's not. Here, let me take this off screen so I can copy that password since the JavaScript button is not working for me. Don't know why none of my copied and pasted values are copying or pasting, but it's okay. I'll just do it all off screen so I'm not leaking any information. Finally. All right. So over here on the right hand pane, I'm going to minimize that and don't save that. Over here in the right-hand pane where we're browsing the www root in the FTP location in Azure App Service, you see they've given me a hosting start.html. Let's show you what that means. So the URL that I specified earlier was Cam hopes this, I probably should have picked a shorter one, hopes this demo goes better.azurewebsites.net. You go to that and you get this page. Hey, app service developers, yada, 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 yada. What they're not telling you is that page is one of the default documents. Hosting start.html is one of the default documents for the app service. We're looking at that hosting service.html or hosting start.html file. In fact, if I delete that hosting start.html file, yep, delete it. Goodbye. I don't want it. Come back over here and refresh. We have nothing here. So that means we should be able to browse to my hard drive here to that publish location we found earlier and pick up everything, bring it over here. And with that, in theory, if everything's set up correctly on the back end, I refresh this, hopefully There we go. There's our page. It only took like, 30 minutes longer than it should have, but there's our web application. We've actually, instead of deploying through Visual Studio, we deployed it manually through FTP because my Visual Studio won't authenticate tonight for some reason. All right, so let's go ahead and finish the rest of the module. We'll just use that one extra step of doing the FTP instead of going directly from Visual Studio to Azure. The rest of the module, if we come back over here, so to explore your app, right? So we've got our published profile that we created. So that's I forget where they stick that. Yeah, here's the published profile that we created, that folder profile. That's where that is. We have our Razor pages here. You saw I edited the index Razor page. Hello from Microsoft Learn. This has been painful. Crying, laughing emoji. And while we're at it, we'll go ahead and edit another page. Use this page to detail your site's privacy policy. How about this site doesn't have a privacy policy? Whoops. I don't think that's compliant with EU laws, but it's a demo. So let's go ahead and republish. I'm going to publish to that same folder. So there, the publish succeeded. And if I refresh over here, where do I have a refresh button? Is that what this is? Yes. You can see my timestamps all changed. So I'll just do what I did before, where I grabbed all that and drag it and drop it into Azure again, and I'll overwrite, always use, go for it. So if we go back to our web app and refresh, it didn't refresh. It should have. What didn't happen? Let me see. Did I? Oh, you know what? Did I save and build and all that first? Here, let's run locally just to make sure that it looks the way we think it should look. So there it works locally with our crying, laughing emoji and everything. We'll publish it to that same folder one more time. 1:58 a.m. Let's refresh. Yeah, it didn't update any of those because it wouldn't need to. I'm gonna just, on a hunch, grab those two DLLs and push them out there again. Let's try refreshing one more time. Refresh. Okay, well, when in doubt.
And while you're doing this, I'll just add, I was trying this out on my system here locally. I also had a few challenges with my Microsoft account. I switched to my personal account and everything is working nicely. So the good news is for our learners, they should be able to complete the lab successfully on Sandbox. For us Microsoft, though, it might be a little harder. So hopefully all of you listening are able to go through the lab. And this is actually a lot more entertaining watching camp work this way. So
entertaining for you, maybe.
Yeah, we're all having a great time.
All right, so yeah, so we've deployed our changes. I don't know. There must have been some kind of caching going on. What I did was I blew away everything I had out there and just redeployed it again. And now you can see we are looking here at the Azure websites.net app service URL, and there's our app running just like we expected. In fact, I'm going to go ahead just to prove it. I'm going to go ahead and there's the URL in the chat if you all want to hit it real quick. While you guys are generating that load that I just put out there, I'm going to hop over to Application Insights. Because you remember we lit that up when we created Azure App Service, right? So all we have to do is go over to Azure to our Application Insights resource, and I can hop down to Live Metrics. Except I didn't instrument it with the live metrics require the SDK. My mistake. The other thing that I can do, however, is I can go to Performance, and over the last, we can change the scope to 30 minutes. And it hasn't ingested any data yet. There's a little bit of a lag time when it ingests there's a little bit of a lag time ingesting Application Insights telemetry. In theory, you shouldn't need to light up anything else other than that switch that I turned on. Let me come back over here and make sure that's. Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't need the profiler or any of that, but we'll do it anyway. It's saying it's not available because the .NET SDK is not lit up. The Application Insights SDK isn't lit up for this app. So that's not going to be the demo that I thought it was either. At any rate, hopping back over to the module, we've explored our app. We've published an update. I just went ahead and kind of skipped through all of that. So to review, in theory, what we would have learned from this module is deploying from Visual Studio. But in my case, in the demo today, Visual Studio was a little temperamental with authentication. I saw one message go by in our internal chat. The producer thought there might be an issue with how we're doing our teams for this live event because I had to log into a different tenant than what I'm usually logged into. I don't know. I've never seen it behave like that before. So my sincere apologies that this demonstration didn't go off quite as planned. Having said that, I hope that you took away from it an experience that shows you the sandbox, shows you that we have the ability to let you play with Azure resources without costing you any money. It gives you a lot of flexibility in defining what you want to learn within Azure, because we've got all kinds of resources available to you in the sandbox, from VMs to app service to service bus to SQL database to Cosmos DB, Postgres. How do they pronounce that? Postgres SQL? I don't know how you pronounce it, but I've written a module using it. So with that, I'm going to turn to the audience, and dear audience, do you have any questions? I would love to take some questions from you guys. We'll just wait in awkward silence while some questions get submitted.
Well, your moderators have been doing a great job answering questions has been going through, and you've had a lot of really great support from the learners as well. So everyone's been praising all of your ad hoc demos here, Cam. It's a nice job.
So thank you, Adrian. I appreciate that. So I see one question out in the queue about for the FTP. Was there any need to secure more with hash keys? I have to be honest. I haven't played. This is the first time I've done the FTP deployment in a while, and it looks like they've actually changed. Let me go. Where's my portal? Looks like they've changed that experience a little bit. I'm not quite sure what options we have available to us anymore. If I come down here, FTP dashboard, so we have our application credentials that appears to be just a username and a domain and a password, and not like a hash or signed anything. But it seems to be scoped just to this app. they didn't used to have that capability. It used to be that an FTP account like this was scoped to your entire subscription, which was honestly, I thought that was nuts. Now we no longer have to have it scoped to the entire subscription. It's scoped to the app, but it looks like you can still do it scoped to the subscription, scoped to the user, which I would not recommend doing it. I would scope it to this individual app. I saw another question in there somewhere about, I don't remember what it was. There was something I was going to answer, and then it got cleared out of the queue. I don't remember what it was. Oh well. Let's see. I see more questions coming. Oh, there is the security warning. Somebody says they had a security warning. Should they proceed? They had a question. You're about to install a certificate from a certificate authority claiming to represent localhost. So yes, that's fine. If you're generally speaking, when you're working in Visual Studio and you try to run your application locally, a lot of times your browser is going to come up and it's going to say, "Hey, you're testing with a self-signed localhost certificate. Is that okay?" And yeah, it's okay. Visual Studio created that, and it's okay for you to click, yeah, that certificate's fine, and that you shouldn't even have to mess with that anymore. I had another question. First person said, "Hey, no worries on the issues. I liked how you showed the FTPS deployment, but not a deployment question. But can we make our own sandboxes?" So, unfortunately, no. Now, what you can do. The sandbox policies for this module that we just did, this, not that one, this one, the one we just did, the sandbox policy for this one uses a web app. I went too far. I don't know why I'm on this module. I won't even look at this. Forget what's on my screen. I'll just talk. The module we just went through uses a security policy for the Learn sandbox that actually allows quite a few resources. So if you wanted to go out there and play around with, wanted to just like create a sandbox with this particular module and play around with that, and like it also supports Azure SQL and Azure Service Bus. Trying to remember what else off the top of my head. I can't think of what other resources. At PostgreSQL, we got PostgreSQL added in there. So if you want to play with some of those resources, you can. Other than that, what I would recommend you do is you look through the Learn modules that they have published. Like we'll go to, here, I'll make a new tab, docs.microsoft.com/learn. I would go out and browse, and whatever Azure resource you're interested in, like let's say it's Service Bus, right? See if they have a module out there that uses the sandbox. I don't see any right now that use Service Bus. Okay, well, let's think of another one. Postgres. There we go. Create an Azure database for Postgres SQL Server. So this one's going to create a sandbox for you. I haven't done this one yet, but it'd be a few steps in. It's going to create a sandbox for you that's already scoped to creating Postgres SQL. So whatever Azure resource you're wanting to learn about, go out there, search, see if we have a Learn module, and that Learn module guaranteed will let you play with it in the portal, in the sandbox, wherever, scoped appropriately for that module. Any other questions? Because if not, I think that sounds like a good opportunity to wind down. I'm going to throw this slide up on my screen that says thank you. To continue the learning path, so we have that, please continue the learning path. Check out the Azure Fundamentals learning path. Check out the Rock, Paper, Scissors, Lizard, Spock Learn collection that they've got going. That's on the next slide. I'll actually show that because we've got the digital swag going on with that. There we go. We've got Microsoft Learn TV. We've got more of these sessions, I think. And with that, I want to thank you for your attendance. I want to again apologize for the difficulties that I had with my demos. I certainly appreciate your understanding. Yeah, it certainly happens. I would have preferred to give you the experience you came for, though. So certainly no hard feelings if you check out the recording from this same session that was also put on by my friends Myra or Brady, because I think their demos probably went better. And again, give me a follow on Twitter. I love hearing from customers all over the world with .NET. .NET docs questions, concerns, and contribute. We love having contributors to the .NET docs, so I certainly look forward to seeing you there. And with that, I don't have anything else. Please enjoy build and stay safe out there in the current crisis. Stay healthy and be careful.